I think somebody might still need to mute. I don't know if we're able to do that for them or not. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. So we wanted to just host a really short, Jed, are you logged in? Could you let people into the,
Yeah.
Or maybe Lindsay let people in as they come in. We wanted to do just a short webinar to kind of kick off the local application and allow us to share any changes that were made over the last fiscal year to the local app, and then also take some general questions from you and share how you can connect with our team one-on-one if you need. So I only have a couple of slides. I don't want to scare you with a slide deck, but I do want to share a couple of main points from like our fiscal team. And then Chris and Jed are going to spend some time going through Indy Grants, especially for those who this will be their first time completing the local app in the system. And then we will wrap it up. So we have talked quite a bit, sometimes individually. Why didn't my slide move forward? Oh, there we go. We've talked a little bit about the importance of connecting your CLNA to your local application, and that is something with our review process as we look over CLNAs and then also the approval process for the local apps. We really want to make sure that the local applications are connected directly to the CLNA. So as best you can, make a direct connection that would be very easy during the review process for us to be able to connect those activities and planned expenditures to your CLNA. So I just posted that part of Perkins that requires that for your review. In the email that was submitted to you on the 1st, I also attached the full Perkins text if you want the addition. There's some additional language that I didn't include on these slides. So feel free to reference that additional language, especially with this local use of funds slide. So funds made available to eligible recipients shall be used to support career and technical education programs of sufficient size, scope, and quality. And then these are the 6 activities that we have set up in Indy Grants for you to connect back to the CLNA and for your budget. So these are the 6 uses of funds. There is additional language in the Act that gives some specific examples of how that would be implemented. So those 2 things are really important as you venture into the local app. I just wanted to make sure that we had a short conversation about some of the why connections need to be made and why things are allowable or unallowable. So a memo was sent in the email on the 1st, going through a little bit of detail in regards to the 6 uses of funds. They are set up as activities. You will see that when Chris goes through the Indy Grants actual local application here in a minute. But for Kathleen and I and our review team, if you are able to, in the activity tab, connect each of these 6 usages to your plan. They don't all have to have Perkins funding attached. So for example, if you provide career exploration and career development activities in a way that happens outside of Perkins funding, it would really be helpful as we review the local app if you just put a budget of 0 and kind of describe how that happens outside of Perkins. So there was a part of the memo that talked about discussing that if it happens through local funds or state funds or in another way, so that we can ensure all 6 uses of funds are part of your program, but they do not have to have Perkins funding attached. Okay, so I just want to make sure that you know that. You don't have to have funding for each of the 6 activities. And then this is my last slide, just a reminder on the deadlines, the CLNA, March 12th, that's coming up here pretty quick. Our team is diving into those and getting feedback to you as quickly as possible. April 12th would be the deadline for the local app. And then the resources, I shared the guidance memo in the email. It's also linked on our webpage, and I think Lindsay is going to link those again in the chat. If you have, we'll definitely have time for broad questions if you have an overarching question. Otherwise, if you'd like to set up a meeting with myself about your budget or the expectations, then feel free. I know some of those will vary because some of you are newer than others and doing it for the first time versus having experience. So we can do those conversations one-on-one for sure. Any technical assistance that you need with Indy Grants and actually completing the local app in Indy Grants, those could be sent to Chris or Jed. So maybe we'll take questions at the very end after we kind of go through Indy Grants and the actual local application. So let me switch over there real quick.
If you have questions that you think of, you can, if you type them into the chat, then at the end, if you don't want to forget your question or something, we'll go back at the end and answer. We'll go through all the questions.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Good idea.
Okay, so first thing, actually, I'm gonna log out.
Oh, sure.
No.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. That's fine. That'll work.
I'll play the beginner.
Okay, so when you, I know we have some people that maybe have never done this before, so I want to start from the beginning. So I'm assuming everybody now that will be doing this will have a login. So if you have a login, first thing you do is you come to the login screen. If you're used to using enters or something, or maybe you've done the CLNA, here you want to make sure you choose Indy Grants. So just choose Indy Grants, username, password, and then you get in. It'll bring you to the default term, which is the current term, 2324. So when you first log in, you're going to see 2324 stuff. Just keep that in mind. Okay, so go to, right now, what we're working on are basic grants. So you want to go over to Perkins Basic. All the tabs that you see on Laura's screen, you will not see on yours. You only have access to probably a couple of them. But go to basic grant. When you go there, again, you're going to see your 2324 grant. What we're doing is 2425. So if you right click in the grid or up at the top, there's a new grant button. Either one of those ways, you can right click in the grid and choose new or add grant, sorry, or you can hit new grant up at the top. Either way, you're good. Then you'll get this pop up and that's you what year. So you want to pick 2425. And your location should probably default in the list, but anyway, pick, that's fine. Okay, and then hit create grant and it will create it for you and open it up. All right. First thing you can put in whoever is doing this, you can put your contact name and phone number and email and stuff up there at the top. Now those two, the administrator and fiscal agent, those are for invoicing. So if you need to change those, you can change those here. You should get a drop down. And if you have had other signers or whatever, even if maybe they're not there anymore, but we had them as a signer at one point, you should have them on the drop down. So if you need to add somebody brand new, you'll need to let us know, but you can set them up how you want them right there on the screen. So, all right, then you don't need to worry about the grant period. We'll fill those in. That actually should have filled in automatically. But that's all you need to do here. So then one thing you need to notice for the new people for sure, up at the top of the screen, you'll have your CLNA goals. So you want to make sure as you're going through that your activities and everything that you're doing should relate back to at least one of those goals. So wait, go over there to the activity tab. So this is the first place you'll probably go. Down at the bottom, you just hit in the grid. You can right click, or up at the top of that grid, there is a little plus sign. Works the same way. You can do add there, but I always do right click, add. Do your first activity. Then you pick from the drop down list of the usages. So you can just pick anything from that list. Then you'll tell us down in the next cell if this is a continuation or a new activity. So if it's something that you did, last year, it can be a continuation. You'll put in the cost of this activity. So again, this is what your estimated cost is for whatever you're doing here. And then if you have, like, if this is the first year and you're going to pay for a position for 3 years or something, over in the next box, you could put in the length of time you're going to be doing it. But the activity cost is just for this year. Then down in the big box, you'll type in the first big box, I should say. You'll put in, if this is something that needs to be sustained, then, for instance, if you're hiring a position with this money, you need to tell us how you're going to sustain it post-Perkins. That's that box. And then the last box at the bottom is your description. So that's where you tell us what are you doing. So it's probably going to be the largest narrative section within the grant. You just tell us everything that you're doing within this activity.
In the memo, it says highly recommended, and we would really like to see this, although we did not use required. But in addition to the what are you doing that Chris just described, breaking down in a little bit more detail the budget of the costs. And so if you have $100,000 that you would like to spend on this activity, if in that second box you could list some of the budget breakdowns of where you got that activity cost number. I just want to spend a second here because I really think the detail in the activities is where you can really help us on the invoicing end. And so Kathleen has taken on like an initial review of invoicing. Many of you are probably hearing from her regarding invoicing more than me. I do our second review. But that being said, Kathleen is going in and often looking at local apps to find connection to the expenditures. And so if you submit a pair form, we're going back into the local app and was this piece of equipment or was this program discussed as a program need for equipment? Like, is there a connection to the local app to approve the expenditure? And so if she's not finding that, sometimes she's reaching out to you with some assistance in finding it. Is this in your local app? Did we miss it? Was this in your plan? And so this, I think, is where you can help us make that connection and really minimize the back and forth emails about your fund usage. So I know it sounds like we're asking you to maybe do more, but I do think in the long end, it will reduce work on the back end. Sorry, that was probably long-winded.
Fine. All right, so once you've gotten everything here, then up at the top, you want to go to outcomes/methods. It's the next tab. In here, you want to tell us what outcomes are you expecting from this activity. And then down below that, you want to tell us how you're evaluating that. And this may have a direct correlation to the next couple tabs, but how are you evaluating? So if you're doing something that you're thinking is going to increase the number of students enrolled in work-based learning, then you tell us, how are you evaluating that? Are you talking about looking at how many years are you measuring the growth for? How are you measuring it? Just the number of people enrolled in work-based learning courses? Or are you talking about embedded work-based learning? Are you talking about 75+ hour experiences or just getting an experience? Is it job shadowing? What is it that they're doing? So anything you can tell us about what outcomes you expect and then how you're going to evaluate whether or not it's successful. Then the next two tabs are the indicators. And this is really simple, but with a caveat. So you just go through and there's another tab, the same thing, just the rest of the indicators on the other tab. So what you do here is you go through, so each one of these indicators that you anticipate would be impacted by this activity, you'll go into that box. So for example, if you're thinking it's going to increase your placement, you would go down in the box for placement at the bottom there, and you would type in how this activity is going to impact your placement rate. What we don't want to see is you to write something in one of the boxes and then just copy and paste it in every single indicator. I don't believe there are any activities that are going to impact every single indicator, so that's problematic. Or if you're doing 4 or 5 and you just copy and paste the exact same verbiage, I just think you think about what you're writing a little bit. We don't want to have, when they come here to visit us, which they seem to do very often, the feds, they get mad at us about stuff like this. So we just need to make sure that we don't want to be hard on you as reviewers, but sometimes we don't have a choice. So just do the best you can here to tell us something that's specific to the indicator that you're writing it for. So that's those 2 tabs. Then the last tab is the usages tab, and then you can tell us if there's any other usages that you're hitting with this activity. So that's what there's the other ones, and then the B5, there's a drop down of other stuff. And I think it's a multi-select drop down, I believe. So, but that's how you do the activity. So you do that for each one of those. When you get finished, you'll hit the OK button and it'll put the activity down there. You don't have to save after each activity. As you're putting stuff in, I would suggest saving once in a while. The only thing is when you save, it takes you out of when you save, it's like a save and close. So I just know that when we're working here in the office, I don't have this problem at my house, but when we're in the office, for whatever reason, we just drop internet connection occasionally, and it's very frustrating. Jed gets really frustrated about it. But you lose internet connection. If you're working on something and enters, you've lost it. You can't, there's nothing that can be done because it can't, if you go to save it and you're not connected, then there's nowhere to save it to. So it's a problematic. So I would just say, if you have that problem, I would save more frequently. If I'm at my house, when I telework, I don't worry about it because I don't lose internet connection unless the power goes off or something like that. So just know that saving is what prevents that from happening. If you're typing and even if your connection goes down for a second and comes right back, you may not even notice it. But once you lose that connection, it can't talk to the database anymore. So without you logging in again. So again, it's all part of when we built the system, the feds, that's a security measure that they required. So anyway, that's the activity. So when you go into budget, this is where you actually tell us your budget. So I think what they want is in the activities to give us information kind of like this. So if you have an activity that costs $50,000 and you're going to spend, 30,000 of it is personnel and 20,000 is travel, then you'll kind of tell us in the activity, personnel 30,000, travel 20,000, whatever, for the activities. But this is for your whole grant. So you go in. So for each category, you'll just right click on the category, choose edit budget, and then you will tell us the amount is at the bottom. And in that comment box, you'll tell us if there's any narrative stuff that you need to tell us. So if it's personnel and maybe you're hiring 2 positions and there's 2 different activities, you may here tell us that this is hiring of 2 positions and then tell us what they are, maybe so we can sort of tie it back to the activities. If it's equipment, you'll tell us what equipment you're purchasing. Again, if it's across different activities, it's nice to have it here kind of in one place so we can see what's going on. So any narrative stuff that you can tell us about that money, you can tell us that here. So then each time you just hit OK. Then again, when you get finished with your budget, you'll have kind of a roll up down there at the bottom. Now, right now, as you can see, I don't remember what district we did, District 6. It tells you the allocated amount at the bottom. And I saw Mr. Kovac type this question in the chat a minute ago. that is your allocated amount. That is last year's amount. So that's what we're asking you to use for planning purposes. So again, just for planning, you're using last year's amount. We don't really have anything better than that to go on at this point. So use that for now. Once we actually get the allocations, then you'll have to go in and edit your budget and stuff to match it up to the new allocation. So, and it'll tell you your active allocated amount, and then once you get done with your budget, it'll tell you if you're off. So if your allocation is 318,000 and you only in your budget account for 317,000, it'll tell you that you're $1,000 off. So it'll do that calculation for you. So that's the budget. Next tab is programs of study. Now, if you're a secondary district, you do not have to do this. I mean, you really do have to do it. You're doing it in the adoption forms. So the adoption forms you're working on now, those, once that deadline for those passes, we will take all that information and we'll put it here. So when the feds come and they want to look at the grants, the stuff that you put in the adoption forms will show up here. So all you need to know is get your adoption forms all done by the deadline for those and you're good to go. If you're a post-secondary, if you're Ivy Tech or Vincennes, you have to do this. So you just right click in there and it's a free type. So you just tell us what the pathway is, give us a description, you tell us that stuff. And we ask that you put in all of the programs that you're using Perkins money for. So that's how you put those in. So then in each one of the programs that you put in, so if you go and put in, you have a certificate program for welding, then you go over on this tab and you'll put in for each pathway, for each program, you have to answer these 4 questions. So again, you're only putting in the ones that you're using Perkins money for, and you'll have to answer these 4 questions about each one. So yeah, so that's for post-secondary only. For secondary, again, you just do the adopt. You're already doing that. You're already answering the questions all in the adoption forms. So, okay, next tab is grant questions. The grant questions that you'll notice, if you remember last year, there were 11 questions, I think. It's a lot. We know it's a lot. We took away 2 of them, which were kind of a little bit redundant, I guess, those 2. So those are gone. And we made a clarification. So on question number 9, Laura, not Lauren.
Oh, whoops.
Right click on question number 9 and you'll see what I'm talking about there. So this question last year was really a secondary question. So we got a lot of questions from post-secondary about what do we put for this answer? So now secondary has a question and post-secondary has a question. So if you just look up there, you'll see which you answer the appropriate question in the box. So we have kind of made it apply to both. So yeah, so you just answer every question. And people ask us, how much do we need to write for these answers? Just make sure you're answering the question. That's all. As long as you're answering the question and be specific, then you're good. And again, remember that you submit invoices and stuff and you want to buy a piece of equipment for this program, you need to make sure that you've told us about that here, so somewhere in here, even if it's in the questions, you need to tell us more about that you need stuff and what you're doing and how you're doing it. So that kind of stuff goes in the grant questions. So just make sure you answer each one of those. Then the next thing is the indicators and improvement plans. Now, this is a very common source of confusion for people. So the feds require us to do 2 improvement plans. So each year we have a set of indicators. So we just did the indicators for 22-23. Everybody has results. You have to meet at least 90% of your goal, of your AUL. And now they're called SDPLs, not AULs, or DPLs, I guess is what they're called. But you have to meet 90% of your goal. So, and if you don't, then you have to do, for each indicator that you fail, you're actually doing 2 improvement plans. So the one that we have already released and people are working on, a lot of people have already submitted it. That's called the interim improvement plan. So you're telling us from now until the end of the school year, what are we going to do to try to address this indicator. That's and you're doing that. For those of you who have already done it, know this, you're doing it in last year's grant. So you're doing it in the 23-24 grant because you're telling us, what are you going to do in 23-24 to address this? So that's where that goes. In the 24-25 local application, you're telling us, what are we going to do in 24-25 during that year to address this performance on this indicator? So that's the difference. And it tells you in here, it tells you where you have a plan needed. It says pending where you have a plan needed. So you just right click on that. And and if you can do a sort, if you click on each column header, you can sort. So if you want to sort by status, you can get them all to the top. But then you just right click on one of those, and then you go in to the indicator, and then you have to fill out the tabs. So I'll run through these real quick. Here you tell us just kind of what is your plan? What are you doing? If there's anything additional you need to there's a comments box at the bottom. You don't have to fill that in. Just make sure you have that top filled out. And if you go over to the subpopulations tab, you'll tell us. I can't do it.
Losing power.
Go over to the subpopulations tab. You'll see those subpops that are on the reports. If you go run your report in Inters, and I'm not talking about the stoplight report, I'm talking about you go into Inters to the reports, and for the post-secondary people, you can run them in the CLNA. But you run the report, you run, 1S1 or you run 1P1, whatever it is. You get this, what I call the one pager, which is really like almost 2 pages now, but it shows it has a little grid and it shows the indicator. The top line is the population numerator denominator. Then it has the breakdown of the genders, male, female. Then it has all the races. Then it has all the special, all these categories are on there. And it tells you their performance for that. So what you're doing here is any subpopulations that were where there was a gap. So you say, well, my Hispanic students and my limited English students, those performed less than everybody else. So we're going to address those. So you can just click on those boxes next to the ones you're addressing. And then at the bottom, you'll tell us for the ones that you have clicked at the top, how are you specifically addressing those groups in this plan? And honestly, I saw some that I reviewed last year that where they address on the first screen under general, they already addressed it. They already said, we're gonna, our disabled population, we're gonna do this and that. That's part of the plan. So if that's what it is, then here you can say that you addressed it on the general tab. That's good enough if you've already addressed it. But just make sure you're addressing specifically those populations that you've clicked on at the top. That's the important part. You're addressing the subpops that had gaps. Over to action steps. Here you need to, again, the first 3 boxes you need to fill out for sure. The bottom ones are kind of for you. If you have resources that you're purchasing or using, you can put those in. I'm not requiring to see that, but I do want to see the steps, who's responsible, and then how you're going to document progress, because that's what the feds are asking us for. So if we come to you and say about progress, which we talked about, we really should be doing this, then we need you to be able to show us that. So those 3 boxes, and then on additional information, you don't need to tell us anything here except maybe the data sources at the bottom, but it's not required. But if it applies, depending on what you're doing, what the plan is, there have been times where we might need to know that. If you've already addressed it someplace else, you can say you addressed it on one of the other tabs. That's fine too. So that's how you do the improvement plans. Again, you just hit OK. Again, no save button until this is the only save button not on the main screen. The last thing you have to do here is go over to terms and conditions and go through. And now, having said, let me say this, I just realized yesterday we forgot to update this. So it'll be done sometime today and it will change. So if you've already started your grant and already clicked through all these boxes, that's perfectly fine. When we make the change, it will change yours too. So if you're doing this, you can go ahead and do it today, and the stuff will get updated today and it'll fix it. So, but here you just go through and just check the boxes. Make sure that you're agreeing to these conditions. So just check the boxes. That's all you have to do on this screen. Just go down through and make sure you check them all. And that is it. So once you're all done, you go up to the top and hit the save button. We haven't done anything, so the save button's not active, but we're gonna go ahead and hit cancel. There's one more thing I need to show you. Out on the main screen, so let's say we just saved a plan, which we did not. You'll need to go change your grant term. Don't do this because you'll
Okay.
have nothing, but change it to 24-25. You'll see the one that you just created now, so it'll be in there. If you want to, you're all done, you want to submit it. Again, all this stuff's all the moving the grant around is done via a right click. So you just right click on your grant on the one you want to submit. Go ahead and do the right click. And there'll be a button, there is a button that says submit grant for review. When you're all done, that's what you do. You hit submit grant for review, you'll get a pop-up box that asks you basically who is submitting it. It should have your information already filled in. You just hit submit and it will do it, and then that'll send it to us for review. If we have to send it back to you, you should get an email if you don't have them blocked or it's not getting spammed or something like that. You should get an email telling us, and it will come in and see under the grant status, it'll say something about, like you see the one on the screen that it says plan, update, modify. It'll be something like that. And it'll be a different status. If the status says review, which that one that's orange on the screen says review, if it's in review status, you can't edit. So if you try to, oh, I forgot to do something, you try to go in there, you cannot. You can't change anything. If you want that back, you have to tell someone from our office that you need it back, and then we will send it back. We'll put it back and modify for you. If we find that we need you to make an update or something, we'll send it back to you. It'll change it to modify status. You can go make the change, and then you have to resubmit it. Just right click and submit grant for review again. And then until we get to a point when it's all done, and then we'll finalize it, and then you're good to go. Then you can start invoicing when the time comes. Actually, we won't finalize it because you'll have to change your budget once we get that information. So anyway, that's the process for the grants. So now we can open up the questions, and we can take the questions in the chat. We can start with those. Questions in the chat. So first question was about the allocations. Again, those, we do not have those yet. I don't know, from what I read in the news about Congress and what's happening, I don't know when we're going to get them. This could be one of the years we get them late. So I wouldn't hold my breath on those right this second, because you might not make it. But as soon as we get those, we'll turn them around as fast as we can. We have a little work to do with them, but we'll get them turned around and get sent to you guys as soon as we can. So if there is an emergency purchase that may not be in our grant, should we just do a pair form moving forward?
That's a good question. Audra, so we'll keep the pair forms just for the equipment. So if it involves equipment that broke and you did not anticipate it breaking, so you therefore did not plan to purchase, then let's keep that in the pair form for those things, those units that are 5,000 or more. If something happens to a program and you need to expend funds in a way that you did not anticipate. I mean, we did hear that there is concern about, like, it's hard to plan 2 years out. We definitely hear that, understand that, and really want to be able to communicate with you when those things happen. So shoot us an email, let us know what's going on. We can just have conversation through it and talk about it. If we need to open up for local app edits, we can talk about that internally. So I've been thinking about ways to accommodate that, but just, all of that to say, as best you can, be as specific as you can, and just understand that being specific helps in the invoicing, right? Like that, like I said, that fewer back and forth emails. Could you talk about where this is addressed in your local app? We're not able to see where this program was, in your CLNA or an outcome of your CLNA. And if we have trouble connecting, we've just done some emailing. We're trying to be able to better identify your planned expenditures in your local app. And that really makes invoicing easy. When we have seen one where it's like, oh, they're exactly what they were planning to buy. It's in the local app, right? Like, that's just like a seamless process. So as close as we can get to that, while we do hear you and understand that there are going to be things that happen that you didn't anticipate. So we will work through that. Does that answer your question? Okay, Audra. I don't know if I see you on my screen.
back to it if we need to. What is the deadline for the adoption forms? So we've sent out, I think the deadlines went out. I think 8/1 is the deadline to get the adoption form, get all the programs in and stuff. And I think we gave you a little bit more time to get all the questions answered. And again, we're talking about for secondary here. I'm sorry. I just need to make sure I clarify. The questions you have until October 14th to get all the questions answered. So just make sure that you get, actually October 1st to get the questions answered. So anyway, October, you can get the questions put in. So just make sure, we're not going to do anything till, we'll probably wait till the end of October and we'll roll everything into the local app. So you have a little bit more time to do those. And I know there's nothing going on in October for us. So very not busy time of year when 30 days are going on. So I would say get them done before that. Will the program to study tab populate with what we included last year? No, it will be it'll be the 24-25 app will have the 24-25 programs, which is what is being worked on now in the adoption forms. If you don't do anything, let's just say you didn't go in and do anything in the adoption forms, the stuff that you had in last year rolls over. So that stuff will be there, and that's what would end up in the local app would be the stuff that you did last year with no updates. So just make sure you're updating that stuff. Make sure if you have teacher changes that you update the teachers in there and stuff that you need to get all that stuff done.
Sorry, that was a post-secondary question. For the post-secondary folks.
No, it will not. The stuff that was in there last year was not good. We put it in there and it was not good. So I think you probably should put in there the stuff that you want to put in there, the stuff that you're spending money on. And yeah, so it will not. No. Our questions 3 and 4 on the post-secondary program of okay, questions duplicates. Jacqueline, I don't know. I don't think I understand the question.
Questions 3 and 4 on the post-secondary programs of study look like the exact same thing. You said to answer all 4 questions, so I just wanted to make sure on that. And if that's follow-up later, that's fine. I can follow up via email.
Yeah, I'll have to go look. I mean, the questions are the same questions right out of the law. So I don't think they are, but make sure.
They're showing up as the same for Vincent's University too. So we may just need to follow up afterwards.
You take note of that. Got it. All right, I'll look at it. I don't know. It's weird. I guess it's possible when that actually doesn't make any sense at all. So I'll have to go look. I don't know. I guess if there's something there, if there's something wrong with it, I will fix it immediately. So
thank you.
What if it's not what if it's not just self-publishing most of your population? So you're talking about on the improvement plans, you're saying if it's not just one sub-pop, but it's all of them. I would just, I mean, I know sometimes I've looked at them before and sometimes there is all the sub-pops kind of performed the same. And in those cases, I just don't check any and say, they all, they all were about the same. And the stuff that we wrote on the first page, on the first tab in the description applies to everybody. That works too. But if there are gaps, that's one of the big things that feds are honest about, are addressing the gaps. What was the performance statewide for 2S1, 2S2, 2S3? We seem to have a significant drop. Yes. So basically, everybody did awful on those indicators. And when I say did awful, I guess maybe it's all about how you look at it, right? Compared to last year, we did awful. But 2S1 and 2S2 is now for 22, 23, 23, 24. What did we just do? 23, 24. For 22, 23 was the year that we just reported on. And that was the first year that SAT was the test for that cohort. So it was a different test. So the performance on the CTE for CTE students was about the same as the regular population. So we did about what was expected for those two. For the science, I'm told that mostly is taken when they're a freshman. they take that biology I learned, and that was COVID. And I think what the DOE has said, I think, is that they think that's related to, we did poorly as a state, and I think they think it's got to do with the COVID year, because when the students who graduated then were freshmen, I don't know, that's what they were saying. So I think we did lower. There was a decrease in performance statewide on that indicator. So, but we are right now doing our state plan, and we are negotiating new levels. We're not going to change 2S3 because I guess we at this point really don't know what to expect next year. I assume it's going to kind of correct back to what it was. But for 2S1 and 2S2, we're negotiating all new, much lower levels. And once we get those, we will negotiate out with you guys too. So can't do anything until we have the federal negotiation all finished up. So yeah, I think, but as far as writing an improvement plan for those, I think that now that they are, at least for 2S1 and 2S2, now that they're SAT, I know a lot of us now will get at least a crack at our students before they take it. So I think you need to talk about how you're going to incorporate math and English into your programs, or how you are if you're already doing it. So, my biggest concern is that this past year,
Oh, I think that's related to the, if we have an issue that comes up that requires a change.
okay,
So yeah, Audra, that would be a good example and like easily documented.
sorry, submitted the question. Will you please share the due date for post-secondary interim improvement plans? Chad, can you help me out? What would we set for the due date?
Want to say it 31st. Okay.
He will look. He said he thinks it's the 31st, but he's gonna check.
You're gonna be getting an email today about the post-secondary.
While Jed confirms that date, I will try to wrap us up unless there's any follow-up questions that are kind of good for the group. Just to reiterate, our team is available for you one-on-one if you want to talk about your specific local application. Please feel free to reach out if it has to do with the budget or the uses of funds or expectations for when you submit and review. Those would probably be best directed to me. If you have questions about navigating and answering the questions within Indy Grants, those would best be directed to Chris and Jed. And feel free to copy all of us on there, and we can divide and conquer as our team kind of splits duties.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to add, and I will leave it at this if there's no other questions, but just to clarify, your CLNA, whether you're working on it or you've submitted it or whatever at this point, and I know there's a lot of people that have already started their local applications, and that's fine too. Just make sure you don't submit your local application until you have verification that we've approved your CLNA. What I don't want to have happen is people finish up their local application, they're all done, they submit it, and then they get notification that we are asking them to change some stuff in their CLNA, and then it's going to cause them to make changes to their local application. So just make sure, the reason we had them do the way we did it is because we want you to have a submitted local approved CLNA before you finish and submit your local application, because again, that has to be tied together. I can tell you from looking at the CLNAs so far, there's probably a lot of them that are going to come back to you at least to get clarification. We're getting some that you're gonna want to make some clarifications, because if we take it the way it is, you're gonna have trouble submitting invoices when you want to get the money, because you're not gonna have addressed this stuff. So we're just gonna try to make sure that we at least have the stuff addressed that we need to make approving the invoices much easier. So just make sure you don't submit your local application until you hear from us on your CLNA.
There's a couple more questions since we
right,
last
so-
visited. Several years ago, there was additional funding through a supplement grant that could be used for math, LA Resources, math, and CTE. Do you see the state revisiting this?
I don't know. I remember what you're talking about, and I could see that as a possibility, I think. Because now things are a little different now that it's SAT. So I can't speak to it. That's more of a question for Tony, but that's probably not a bad idea to talk to people about and help people with getting that integration done. So,
And then
Thanks,
rough
Chris.
estimate,
no worries.
a
Thanks.
rough estimate on how long the CLNA review will take. That's a great question. And so I didn't really talk much about that, but our team is reviewing, so our whole team is kind of dividing and conquering the CLNA review as they come in. So we have just kind of prioritized them by the submission date. And so if you submitted early, then you will be hearing back from us early. But I don't have a date for yours, Floyd, I guess is probably my no answer. Feel free to
You have 30,
send an
you
email
have
if you
30
want
days
to
to
check
do the reviews.
Yeah, so I think
30 days after you're.
from when you submit it.
our plan is to have them back, have at least them reviewed, and you'll hear back from us within 30 days of the date that you submitted it. Right now, I know we have a staff meeting on Monday to talk about how we're gonna review them and what we're looking for. Just trying to make sure everybody's on the same page so that we're not reviewing them. Somebody's reviewing them really harshly and somebody's just letting everything go. We're trying to be on the same page, so we're reviewing the same way. So, but yeah, the plan is 30 days from your submission. Any other questions?
Thank you for hanging in. I thought I initially scheduled this for an hour. And then I thought, man, 30 minutes should probably do it. And I have learned a lesson to allow an hour for this. So for those of you who hung on extra minutes than what you had initially planned when you joined, I do apologize for cutting it shorter. I'm glad that we were able to have the conversation. We will send the recording out in case there's anyone that is assisting with the local application that's not on the call on your team or anyone from other districts who weren't able to join live. So that will come in a follow-up email. Okay, thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day.